The coins hit the stone floor like a thunderclap, hundreds of them spinning and ringing across the ancient pavement, while grown men scrambled on their hands and knees to collect what they could. Doves burst from their cages in a white explosion of feathers and panic. And in the center of it all, a carpenter from Nazareth stood holding a whip he had braided with his own hands, chest heaving, eyes burning with something the merchants had never seen directed at them before. The full, undiluted fury of a man who believed he was standing in his father's house,
and that they had turned it into a crime scene. This is not the gentle Jesus of Sunday school illustrations. This is the moment that got him killed. To understand what happened that day, you first have to understand what Jerusalem became during Passover. Because it wasn't just a city anymore, it was a pressure cooker. The year is roughly 30 of the Common Era. Under normal circumstances, Jerusalem is home to perhaps 50,000 souls, a modest but significant city perched on the hills of Judea, ruled from a distance by the iron fist of Rome. But this is not a normal time. This is the week before Passover, the most sacred festival in the Jewish calendar, the annual remembrance of liberation from Egyptian bondage. And every road leading to Jerusalem is chalked with travelers. They come from Galilee in the north, a journey of several days on foot through the Jordan Valley. They come from the coastal towns of Caesarea and Joppa. They come from the Jewish communities scattered across the Roman Empire, from Alexandria in Egypt, from Antioch in Syria, from as far away as Rome itself. By the time the festival begins, the city's population has swelled to nearly 200,000, 4 times its usual size. Every inn is full, every rooftop is a campsite, every alley smells of cooking fires and animal dung, and the sweat of travelers who have walked for weeks to be here, and every single one of them is heading to the same place, the Temple of Jerusalem, Herod's temple, one of the architectural wonders of the ancient world. The Roman historian Pliny called it the most remarkable building in the known world, and even accounting for the hyperbole of antiquity, the description was not far wrong. Its retaining walls rose over 100 feet from the valley floor. Its courtyards could hold tens of thousands. Its inner sanctum, the Holy of Holies, was believed to contain the very presence of the living God, the same God who had parted the Red Sea, who had spoken from the burning bush, who had carved commandments into stone with his own finger. It was the spiritual nucleus of an entire civilization, the axis around which Jewish identity, Jewish law, Jewish hope all rotated. To stand in its shadow was to stand at the intersection of heaven and earth, but there was another side to the temple, a side that smelled less like incense and more like money. The outermost courtyard of the temple complex was called the Court of the Gentiles. It was the one area where anyone could enter, Jew or non-Jew, clean or unclean, rich or destitute. In theory, it was a place of prayer, a space where even those excluded from the inner courts could lift their faces toward heaven and feel some proximity to the divine. In practice, it had become a bazaar. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. It had crept in gradually, the way corruption always does, one practical concession at a time, each one reasonable on its own, until the sum of all those reasonable concessions became something monstrous. It started with the currency exchange, the temple tax, a half shekel required annually from every Jewish male, could only be paid in one specific coin, the Tyrian shekel, not because it bore any sacred image, but because it had the highest silver content of any coin in circulation. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. The Tyrian shekel actually bore the face of Melkart, the Phoenician god, a pagan deity on the only coin accepted in God's house, but silver purity trumped theological purity, it seemed, at least when money was involved. And so the money changers set up their tables. Pilgrims arriving with Roman denarii, Greek drachmas, Egyptian coins, whatever currency they carried from whatever corner of the empire they called home, had to exchange their money before they could pay their temple tax. The exchange rate was not favorable. A surcharge of 4 to 8% was standard. For a poor farmer from Galilee who had saved for months to make this pilgrimage, that surcharge was not a minor inconvenience, it was a wound with raise. But the currency exchange was only the beginning. The Torah required animal sacrifices for Passover, most commonly a lamb, though the poorest worshippers could substitute a pair of doves. The animals had to be without blemish, inspected and approved by the temple priests, and here is where the system revealed its true genius of extraction. A pilgrim could, in theory, bring his own animal. Many did, leading their lamb hundreds of miles across the Judean hills. But when they presented their animal for inspection at the temple, the priests would often find a flaw, a spot on the hide, a minor limp, something imperceptible to the untrained eye but apparently disqualifying by priestly standards. The solution, conveniently, was right there in the courtyard. Pre-approved animals, already inspected, guaranteed to pass, available for purchase, at a significant markup. Pair of doves that might cost a few coins in the markets outside the temple walls could cost 15 or 20 times that amount inside. A lamb suitable for the Passover sacrifice, the centerpiece of the most important meal of the year, could consume an entire family's savings. And there was nowhere else to go. The temple held a monopoly, enforced by religious authority, protected by tradition, and lubricated by the understanding that a percentage of every transaction flowed upward to the priestly aristocracy. The high priest's family, the House of Annas, controlled much of this trade. They were not starving spiritual leaders. They were, by the standards of their time, fabulously wealthy. Their estates, their fine robes, their political influence, all of it built on the steady stream of revenue that flowed through the court of the Gentiles like blood through a beating heart. And the noise, the smell, the chaos of it all. Imagine trying to pray, trying to reach for something sacred and transcendent, while livestock bleated and defecated 3 feet from where you knelt, while merchants shouted prices over your bowed head, while coins clinked and rang on stone tables and the air was thick with dust and the copper tang of animal blood.
This was the only space in the temple where a non-Jewish seeker could come to pray, and it had been turned into a stockyard.
Into this scene walks a man from Nazareth. He is not wealthy. He is not a priest, not a Levite, not a scribe. He holds no official position. He commands no army. By every metric that Jerusalem's power brokers use to measure a man's significance, he is no one. A traveling teacher from a rural backwater so insignificant that people joke about it. Can anything good come from Nazareth, they say, and they mean it, but he has been drawing crowds. Thousands of them. In the villages of Galilee, along the shores of the lake, in the towns of the Decapolis, he speaks with an authority that doesn't come from credentials or lineage. He heals the sick. He eats with tax collectors and sinners. He tells stories that cut through pretense like a blade through silk.
And now he has come to Jerusalem. He has come to the temple, and what he sees there stops him cold. He stands in the colonnade and watches. He watches a widow count her last coins and slide them across a money changer's table, receiving back less than what she needs.
He watches a father argue with a livestock merchant, his voice breaking as he realizes he cannot afford the approved lamb and will have to settle for doves, a public admission of poverty. He watches a group of Gentile men trying to pray in a corner, their eyes squeezed shut, their lips moving, while a merchant drives a cart of doves past them so close it clips one man's shoulder. He watches all of this. Then something in him ignites, not the hot, reckless anger of a man who has lost control. Something colder, then something more deliberate. The focused, purposeful fury of a man who sees injustice so clearly, so completely, that silence becomes complicity. He bends down. He picks up cords from the ground, perhaps discarded rope from animal pens, perhaps leather strips used to bind merchandise, and slowly, methodically, he braids them into a whip. What happens next takes perhaps 5 minutes. It changes history. He moves through the courtyard like a storm. The first table goes over with a crash that silences the nearest merchants, a heavy stone slab slamming against the pavement, coins erupting into the air and ringing off the flagstones like metallic rain. Before anyone can react, a second table follows, then a third. He is not indiscriminate, he is precise. He targets the money changers first, the men who sit at the gateway of exploitation, converting desperation into profit. Their carefully sorted stacks of Tyrian shekels scatter across the courtyard floor. Pilgrims and merchants alike freeze, staring. Some of the money changers drop to their knees, scrabbling for coins. Others back away, hands raised, eyes wide. Then he turns to the animal sellers. The whip cracks, not at people, but at the air near the livestock pens. The sound is sharp enough to startle the animals into motion. Lambs bleat and scatter. Doves burst from their cages in an explosion of white feathers. He opens pen after pen, releasing the merchandise that was never merchandise at all but living creatures pressed into the service of a corrupt economy. He blocks the pathways. Merchants who have been using the temple courtyard as a shortcut, carrying their goods through the sacred space as if it were nothing more than a convenient thoroughfare, find their way barred by a man who will not move, who stands in their path with the calm certainty of someone who knows exactly what he is doing and why. And then his voice fills the courtyard. Not screaming, not ranting, speaking with the rolling cadence of a man quoting words so old they have the weight of mountains behind them. Is it not written, "My house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations"? The words come from Isaiah, chapter 56, a passage about God's house being open to everyone, to the foreigner, to the outcast, to those whom the religious establishment had declared unworthy. It is a promise of radical inclusion, and by quoting it here, in this place, at this moment, he is making clear what has been lost, what has been stolen. Then the second quotation, harder, sharper, like a knife sliding between ribs. But you have made it a den of robbers. Jeremiah, chapter 7. The prophet who stood at the gates of the first temple, centuries earlier, and warned that performing rituals while practicing injustice would not save the nation. The prophet whose warnings were ignored. The prophet whose temple was destroyed. The implication is devastating. He is not merely criticizing the merchants. He is drawing a direct line between this temple and the one that was destroyed, suggesting that the same corruption that brought ruin once is at work again, that the people who claim to serve God are in fact robbing the very people God told them to protect. The courtyard falls silent, not the comfortable silence of peace, but the electric silence that follows a lightning strike, the silence of people trying to understand what they have just witnessed. Some of the pilgrims are afraid. They have just watched a man physically assault the commercial infrastructure of the temple, and they know what happens to people who challenge power in occupied Judea. Roman soldiers patrol the temple perimeter. The temple guard answers to the high priest. There are protocols for dealing with troublemakers, and those protocols are not gentle. But others, the ones who have been robbed by the exchange rates, who have watched their families go without so they could afford the approved sacrifice, who have choked on the injustice of being told they need to pay more to reach God, something in them is blazing with recognition. They have felt this anger. They have swallowed it for years. And now someone has given it a voice, given it a body, given it the crack of a whip and the crash of stone on stone. The temple authorities are watching too. The chief priests, the elders, the scribes, they do not rush in. They are too shrewd for that. The crowd's energy is unpredictable, and this man from Galilee has followers, perhaps many of them here in the courtyard at this very moment. A direct confrontation in front of the Passover throngs could ignite something uncontrollable. So they watch, and they remember, and they begin, quietly, to plan. What Jesus did in that courtyard was not an act of random violence. It was not a tantrum. Scholars and historians across 2,000 years have recognized it for what it was, a piece of prophetic street theater. A symbolic action designed to communicate a message so clearly that no one who witnessed it could misunderstand. And the message was this: when a system uses God as a paywall, that system has lost its holiness. Consider the precision of his targets. He did not attack the temple itself. He did not storm into the inner courts. He did not challenge the right of the priests to perform sacrifices or the authority of the Torah to require them. His anger was not directed at religion. It was directed at the exploitation that had attached itself to religion like a parasite, feeding on the faith of ordinary people, growing fat on their devotion. The distinction matters enormously. There are those throughout history who have used this story to argue against organized religion itself, to claim that Jesus was rejecting the entire temple system. But that reading misses the point entirely. Jesus did not come to abolish the temple.
He came to purify it.
To strip away the layers of corruption that had turned a house of prayer into a house of profit. To remind the power brokers that the building they controlled was not theirs, it belonged to God, and God, apparently, was not pleased with the management. This is a teaching that echoes through every century that follows. Every time a religious institution charges admission to grace, every time spiritual authority is wielded to extract money from the vulnerable, every time the trappings of faith become more important than the substance of faith, the overturned tables are there, ringing on the stone floor, reminding us. But there is a second layer to this event that is easy to miss if you are not paying attention, and it may be the most radical element of all. When Jesus quoted Isaiah, "My house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations," he was not making a general statement about inclusivity. He was making a specific accusation about a specific injustice happening in a specific place. The court of the Gentiles was the only part of the temple where non-Jews were permitted. Beyond it, stone barriers warned that any Gentile who crossed them would be responsible for his own death, an inscription that has actually been found by archaeologists, carved in Greek and Latin, its threat as blunt and unambiguous as a locked door. For Gentile seekers, people who believed in the God of Israel but were not born Jewish, people who had traveled great distances to stand in the shadow of the temple and offer their prayers, the court of the Gentiles was the only room in God's house where they were welcome, and it had been turned into a livestock market. Think about what that means. The one space allocated for outsiders to encounter the divine had been filled with the noise and stench of commerce. It was not an accident, it was not an oversight, it was a statement of priorities. The comfort of the money changers mattered more than the prayers of the foreigner. Profit mattered more than inclusion. The insider's convenience mattered more than the outsider's soul. By overturning those tables, Jesus was doing something more than protesting economic exploitation. He was physically clearing space for the marginalized. He was making room. He was saying, with his body and his hands and the crack of that braided whip, that the people pushed to the edges of the system, the foreigners, the poor, the ones who didn't have the right bloodline, or the right currency, or the right connections, those people matter. Their access to the divine is not a lesser priority, it is the whole point. This is what makes the temple cleansing more than a historical footnote. It is a living rebuke to every generation that builds walls, physical or systemic, between seeking people and the God they are trying to reach. There is a popular image of Jesus that has persisted through centuries of art and teaching. Gentle, soft-spoken, perpetually serene. A man who never raised his voice, who turned the other cheek, who spoke in parables and metaphors and let the meaning land where it may. That image is not wrong, but it is incomplete. And the temple cleansing is the moment that reveals the missing piece, because what we see in that courtyard is not a man who has lost control. It is a man who is in complete control of his emotions, of his message, of his timing. He does not strike anyone. He does not injure anyone. He targets property, not people. He uses the whip to drive animals, not to wound merchants. Every action is calibrated. Every word is chosen from the prophetic tradition with surgical precision. This is what scholars call righteous indignation. It is not the anger of a man who has been personally wronged. It is the anger of a man who sees others being wronged and refuses to remain silent. It is the anger of a teacher who watches his students being exploited by the very system that was supposed to nurture them. It is the anger that says, "This is not what this place was for. This is not who we were supposed to be." And it is important to note what this act of courage cost. Jesus was not naive. He knew the political landscape. He knew that the temple establishment was intertwined with Roman authority in ways that made any disruption of temple commerce a potential threat to public order. He knew that the high priestly family had both the motive and the means to destroy him. He knew that Pontius Pilate, the Roman prefect, maintained a garrison in the Antonia fortress overlooking the Temple Mount for precisely these kinds of disturbances. He did it anyway. Multiple historians point to this event as the catalyst, the final straw that sealed his fate. The temple authorities could tolerate a wandering teacher. They could absorb the impact of his parables and his healings and his popularity among the common people. But they could not tolerate a direct assault on the economic engine that sustained their power. That was an existential threat, and existential threats are dealt with definitively. He walked into that courtyard knowing it might cost him his life. He picked up the cords, he braided the whip, he overturned the tables. Meekness is not weakness. It never was. There is a dimension to this event that is easy to overlook from a modern vantage point, but which would have been immediately obvious to anyone living under Roman occupation in 1st century Judea. The temple was not just a religious building. It was, in economic terms, the equivalent of a national bank. The treasury held not only the temple tax collected from Jews worldwide, but also private deposits, charitable funds, and what amounted to the financial reserves of the Judean state. When the Romans had conquered Jerusalem decades earlier, one of their first acts was to ensure that the temple's financial operations continued uninterrupted, because a stable temple meant a stable economy, and a stable economy meant a compliant population. The Roman prefect, Pontius Pilate, kept a permanent garrison in the Antonia fortress, a military installation built directly adjacent to the Temple Mount, with towers that allowed soldiers to observe the temple courtyards below. During festivals, when the population surged and tensions ran high, additional troops were brought in from Caesarea. The message was clear: Rome was watching, always watching. In this context, what Jesus did in the court of the Gentiles was not merely a religious protest. It was an act of civil disobedience within sight of the most powerful military force on earth. He disrupted the flow of commerce in an institution that Rome depended upon for regional stability. He caused a public disturbance during the most volatile week of the year. He challenged the authority of the priestly aristocracy that served, in practical terms, as Rome's local administrators. From Pilate's perspective, this was not a theological dispute. This was a threat to the Pax Romana, the Roman peace that was maintained not through justice but through overwhelming force and the suppression of any challenge to the established order. The wheels that would turn toward Golgotha had begun to move. 2,000 years have passed since a carpenter's son walked into the most important building in the ancient world and turned it upside down. The temple itself is gone, destroyed by Roman legions in 70 CE, just as Jeremiah had once warned, just as Jesus himself reportedly predicted. Its stones were scattered. Its treasury was looted. Its golden menorah was carried through the streets of Rome in a triumph that is still carved into the Arch of Titus. But the overturned tables are still falling. Every generation hears the crash of stone on stone and has to decide what it means for them. Every institution that claims sacred authority has to answer the question that Jesus posed with his body and his whip and his voice. Is this a house of prayer, or have you made it something else? Are you clearing space for the outsider, or have you filled that space with your own machinery of profit and exclusion? The teaching endures because it addresses something that never changes about human nature, our capacity to take what is holy and turn it into a transaction, to build systems that serve the powerful while wearing the language of the sacred, to fill the spaces meant for prayer with the noise of commerce and call it necessary, to mistake the institution for the thing the institution was supposed to protect. Jesus did not overturn those tables because he hated the temple. He overturned them because he loved what the temple was supposed to be. And the distance between what it was supposed to be and what it had become was a distance measured in the tears of widows and the empty hands of the poor, and the silenced prayers of outsiders who had nowhere else to go. The tables are still on the ground. The question is whether anyone alive today has the courage to leave them there. If you had been standing in that courtyard, watching the coins scatter across the stone, hearing those words from Isaiah ring off the colonnades, would you have stood with the carpenter or stepped back with the crowd? Tell me in the comments. If history told through moments like these is what draws you in, subscribe, because there are more stories that deserve to be told this way. And if this one made you see an ancient event with new eyes, a like helps more people find it.